Good morning everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 19th of September and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson, for episode 380. So more chatter that matters this week.
Yes, all the chatter that matters. Get that
all
hashtag.
All the chatter that matters,
so,
yes.
So we've busy week again, I think. But I mean, it's. I think I've just put something out this morning saying I can't believe it's Friday already. I mean, the weeks and the days are going so quick at the minute. But the sector isn't slowing down either, as the headlines prove this week, don't they?
No, it was, in all honesty, it was a bit of a struggle this week because there were two or three headlines that I would have liked to have included, but they fell off the list. So we really have got all the chatter that matters this week.
Do you want to go through some of the headlines? Because we're talking around some of the impacts of current sort of lockdowns that are about to happen or just happened, and then obviously some of the rumours that are around the corner and some of the profitability results that have come out this week and others, haven't we?
Yeah, as you say, there is lots going on this week, and we'll kick off in a minute with Robert Forrester's view on how the regional lockdown that started today, as we record this on Friday, will impact the North East. We'll have a look at year ends from both Swansway and Wayland's Automotive. There's plenty of used car trends stuff kicking around this week. So we've got a report on the possible cooling off in August and also a look at why we're keeping cars for longer, or are we? Have a look at why plug-in hybrids have had a bad rap this week. And also a welcome return of a British motoring legend, albeit in French hands. So that'll be the end finally this week. And,
I will question the legend element of that, but yeah.
Certainly iconic.
Yes,
it's an iconic British car that's making a kind of welcome return. So we'll save that to the end.
Exactly.
And headlines this week from Car Dealer Magazine, Motor Trader, AM Online, BBC News, and also a welcome return to our old friends at Motoring Research.
Definitely. So as you say, the first story is that as of today, as we're recording, that there's an interview there on Car Dealer Mag with Robert Forrester from Virtue Motors, who is talking around the lockdown in the North East. It will not impact car dealerships in any way, says Robert. So this is kind of what's been talked about all week, hasn't it? And there is further announcements that have been cited that are due on further lockdowns, but this is where the government are trying to not do a national lockdown and do these regional lockdowns across the UK and obviously, well, England, isn't it, really? Because Wales have done their own and Scotland have done their own, haven't they, in many ways. But, so this is around the North East that has gone into a more restricted lockdown as of this morning, haven't they?
Yeah, and of course, Virtue are headquartered in Gateshead on Tyne and Wear, so they've got a particular interest in this. And in the story, Robert does actually say there's been a number of cases in the business across the region over the last 10 days or so. But this is a significant lockdown, and as you say, by the time we come out, there might be others being talked about, or who knows, in place. But it does affect 2 million households across the region, and the point that Robert makes is that they'll still be able to visit dealerships. So if they're in the market for a new or used car, they can still visit dealerships. So he's trying to put a bit of perspective into this. Yes, there's a lockdown, but he sees business continuing throughout it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a statement to pull out there that that Robert's quoted on is that I think it will take in that people will take it in their stride, and whether it's justified, I'm not convinced. It is what Robert's view is on it. And I suppose from Robert's perspective, we had Robert on the podcast fairly early on at the point of lockdown, and we know through updates from Robert and what he cited on the interview that he was doing business during lockdown, and that was at the highest point of lockdown that we saw across England and the UK. So, I think from Robert's perspective, he has got measures in place, he has got processes in place that allows him to do business through the most stringent of lockdowns. So I suppose from Robert's perspective, if car dealerships, people can still visit car dealerships, whether it is from a viewing, test driving, purchasing perspective, then they will continue operating in a way that allows them to remain open. So you can see that from Robert's perspective, and I think thinking ahead with this, and I know me and you were speaking before the recording, Curtis, that we are expecting more, aren't we? I think there is I think that the view is that we are going to get further lockdowns, whether it is a softer national lockdown, or whether it is just further regional lockdowns. I think the opinion is we're going to see more of this kind of restrictions take place.
Yeah, and it was a good move by Robert to take to the media and put this message out, because there is actually an accompanying video interview to go with this story. So he does make his points very, very clear.
Yeah, and we're moving on because we actually talked about Swansway last week with regards to their recent acquisition of the VW business from Inchcape. And this week it's in Motor Trader talking about their profits that they've just announced. So Swansway profits take a hit in 2019 following eradication of loss-making businesses. So this, we've been talking a bit about business results, haven't we, that have all been COVID related, but actually the headline of this one is talking about obviously a restructuring of the business which resulted in some loss making.
Yeah, and it's significant really that this is all about the year ended December 2019, so pre-everything. So it's an interesting story, and I actually looked at AM's coverage of it as well, because AM went slightly deeper and identified some of the business that were eradicated, which is, I think that's a direct quote from Peter Smythe, and Swansway withdrew over the course of the year because they had this restructuring. They withdrew from Fiat, Bath and Alfa Romeo, closing its sites in Chester, and also closed its Honda dealership in Rochdale during the trading period. But interestingly, and I haven't heard this from any other dealer group boss, Peter Smythe also singles out some of the challenges faced by the German marques that it represented, and saying they had been hit hard last year.
Yeah, and I think we do forget, and we've got to, we moved on to obviously COVID, and we had Brexit, and we're soon moving back onto Brexit as we know in one of the headlines and things like this. But I think that one thing that is quoted in the Motor Trader one is part of the statement from Peter is that that we had the difficult period of the WLTP and RDE through in 2019 as well, and that was significant, as he's saying, and it's probably relative to your comments there, Curtis, to the German brands, because we know they were hit hard around that RDE deadline and the previous WLTP deadline, because VAG and others were hit significantly in terms of their performance in the biggest months of the year when those sort of new legislations were implemented. So it's quite interesting because you soon move on, don't you? It's, we kind of forget of what happened in 2019 and the year before, because we've been focusing on COVID and soon be focusing back on Brexit again.
Yes, and just to round off this story, Peter Smythe, again in AM's coverage, said that the business no longer operates any loss-making locations and expects 2020 profits to be ahead of 2019. So, that's a positive there.
And I think a true demonstration last week wanted that they've been out on the acquisition trail, moving into their site. So again, positive results. And remaining with financial updates, and this comes from our very old good friend John O'Hanlon at Wayland's Automotive. Pre-tax profit soars by 32% to more than 500,000. So again, great results from that business. And this is the story in Car Dealer. And we've had John on a number of times, haven't we, with these talking about his acquisitions and his growth plans and his relationship with Volvo. But actually now we're starting to see the results of that.
Yeah, and who wouldn't want to be running Volvo dealerships along the M4 corridor, which is exactly what John is doing. So there's 4 sites in the group, as we've reported before: Newbury, Oxford, Reading, and where's the other one? I can't remember.
I was going to say you started on that one. I was going to leave that one.
There's 4 sites, so apologies to John for that. But the business was set up in
Swindon.
Well, it was late 2017. Swindon, I think it is. Yeah. Yes. So, as you say, revenue more than doubled, up 136% from 36.2 million to 85.6 million. And the group predicting similar profit levels for 2020. Now, again, it's worth re-emphasizing that these results are based on 2019 up to the end of December. So a lot of confidence there in 2020.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a bit of a sort of a looking ahead there at the end, and they're talking about looking ahead at the end of the Brexit transition on 31st of December, that the directors have warned in the report that no deal scenario would have a negative effect on the UK's economy as well as the consumer confidence, adding that the group was working closely with Volvo in case of such a scenario. So again, like I said before, we're moving very quickly now out of the COVID lockdown period into the impact of what the no deal scenario with no free trade, etc., will have for the automotive sector in the UK. So a lot more to come from that, and these senior leaders such as people like John O'Hanlon are watching that market very closely indeed. So we will keep you updated on that one.
We will return to this theme, won't we?
Yeah, yes. Expect a little bit more from that one, yes.
Yeah. So you're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group, the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector, and available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, and SoundCloud.
So we're heading over to AM Online now, and this is a little bit, as you said at the start there, Curtis, that a lot of conversations now around the used car market. We around particularly with August as well, just gone, and now mid-September. And this is that an article in AM Online that used car sales decline indicated cooling of the market in August. And this is some findings from Indicator, but we were questioning some of this in a way, and that there's other reports coming out that August has been as profitable for retailers as both June and July, which we know that the new car market reasonably okay. It wasn't fantastic in terms of results, but if the dealers are in profitability in the main in August, then that can only have come from used cars. So is it a case that actually there is less product in the market, but it is more profitable for the dealers at the minute, and they are maximising on that demand in the retail space?
Yeah, it is a curious one, this, because we are seeing evidence from other sources, and indeed certainly the anecdotal evidence that I'm hearing is that August actually went very well for used car sales. But this research indicates that the UK was the only one of the 13 European countries surveyed to see a decline, with retail sales down 3.3% year on year.
Yeah, no, and I saw those figures, and they are right that potentially there is less sales activity in terms of volume, but I suppose it's the question whether it is more profitable. We know that previous podcasts we've talked around that supply and demand. We know that demand has been high. We've seen through wholesale market around the conversions, and demand is been very positive, and it's continued since the restriction lifts of lockdown. But CAP HPI have been reporting strength as well in the market, and they're not citing any sign of slowdown of the strength of the used cars, albeit I think the 10-year-old product and above is starting to show some weakness now, the older product, but they're not seeing any weakness coming in terms of used cars. So I think the demand is still there. I think the pricing is still there. I think it's just a case that, there is less product about. It's a little bit more difficult to get hold of, and therefore dealers are maximising on the profitability and maybe selling less cars, but maximising that return. So maybe that's the context behind this one.
Yeah, and talking of stories in need of a bit of context, the headline from the next one really caught my eye. So this is from This Is Money, and it's a rather long-winded headline. But it goes, "We're keeping our cars for longer than ever. Fifth of motors in Britain are over 13 years old, and average age will rise as drivers delay new model purchases." Well, when I saw this, I thought, what on earth's going on? But you sort of dig a little deeper and see that the research here is actually making a comparison between 2019 and 1994, so 25 years apart.
Yeah, I think back to our previous stories around lockdown, COVID, Brexit, RDE, WLTP, and that's just in the last 3 years. I think there's a lot happened since 1994. I think I might have sent you this story, Curtis, as well. That I thought the headline was as you say, This Is Money with Rob Hall there. Very long headline, and certainly grabs the attention, should we say. But again, it is looking at a 25-year period, and they're saying that some 25 years earlier, in 1994, there was only 1.3 million cars of a similar age as motorists hold on to motors for longer. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to remember back to 1994, if I'm honest with you, Curtis, whilst I'm reading the story on this one. And I don't know.
Well, it was the year of Britpop. I remember that.
Yeah.
But I can't remember what was happening on the roads. In fact, I'd only just started writing about the automotive sector. I came onto the scene in 1993, which I remember vividly because it's when the first generation Mondeo was launched. so that was one of the first stories I wrote about. But 94, I mean, it's a world away.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine back then talking about some of the acronyms of today? Cafe and the ULEV, and there would be acronyms that they'd have absolutely no idea what was on the way and what was going to be hitting the sector in the future. But then again, I think I've been recently watching some archived videos through Facebook of old cars when they were going down the motorway, and the introduction of this thing called cruise control was being developed, and this was a car that was this was not a production car, and it was worth £100,000 for this car, and it had cruise control on it. So things are moving, and I think bringing it into today, the market is evolving very, very quick, and it's moving very fast into as the market is moving on.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest the only takeaway from this story is that it's saying that the average age of cars on the roads at the moment is 8.3 years old, and that compares with 6.7 years back in 1994, when I guess cars weren't as reliable as they are now. So there's another factor.
Yeah, and the other takeaway is that I now feel extremely old as well, because I was in the business for a long time in 1994 as well. But anyway, we will move on with that one. So moving on to the, this is this isn't going to end with the story this week. I mean, this is going to be something that's particularly ongoing as we move towards the Brexit deadline and people start talking about tariffs and some of the things that the UK government are talking about at the minute. But this is a story that we're looking at in the BBC News, and this is about the plug-in hybrids are a wolf in sheep's clothing is the headline. But this is talking about that hybrid models are now being omitted from they're also trying to bring the deadline forward by 5 years as well, and remove hybrids from being counted as a vehicle. So lots of conversations taking place with this, particularly from Mike Hawes from the SMMT, who is lobbying with the government to rethink their views and actions on this at the minute. So, I mean, what's your take on this one, Curtis? Because it's quite an interesting one, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and there's certainly some emotive language in the headline there. Plugins are a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's worth pointing out that the analysis and the research comes from two pressure groups, so Transport and Environment, which is one group, and Greenpeace, and it's suggesting that plug-in hybrids emit an average of 120 grams per kilometre, which compares with 44 grams per kilometre in the official lab test. So this is real world testing. It doesn't go into any great detail about how the real world testing has been conducted, but the sample's rather large, because I think they drew from 20,000 plug-in hybrid drivers across Europe, and it was I think these drivers were responding to questions, so they were entering answers to these specific questions, and the data was being collected and gathered and analysed. But plug-in hybrids, I think it's rather missing the point that plug-in hybrids are the transitional technology. We can't make that switch to electric overnight. We need transitional technology like plug-in hybrids, and I don't think there's any mention about the ability of plug-in hybrids to operate in purely electric mode, which is obviously beneficial for emission zones, low emission zones, ULEZs, and that really is where they come into their own.
And there is, I mean, they're looking at moving the ban forward from 2035, which initially was at 2040, if anyone remembers that when it was first announced, and they're trying to now bring it forward to 2030. And as you say, that's the ban of petrol, diesel and hybrid. So there is a lot going on here, and I think there's a lot of questions as we approach the exit deadline of the 31st of December, as how some of the manufacturers will view the UK in the future. You look at all the brands, whether it is from your volume mainstream brand in terms of their investment in hybrid technology, based on the fact that the first instruction was that 2040, then moved to 2035, but hybrid was always in those options. So many manufacturers were moving away from the fully combustion engine into the hybrid technology. And that's everything up through your Rolls-Royce, your Bentley territories, as well as your mainstream. And all of a sudden, that by 2030, as it stands today with the recent announcement, that those vehicles will not be accepted in the UK. So again, lots going on, and we were talking before the recording, which is kind of touching on it a little bit, which was the recent story that we haven't included in this, because I think there's probably opportunity for getting some guests on to talk about this in more detail. But there was an interview with the Polestar CEO, and he sort of cited, in terms of the carbon neutral side of EVs, and I think he talked on one, didn't he, Curtis, that it was for the Polestar 2 EV would need to travel just short of 50,000 miles in the hands of the average European owner to claw back the carbon deficit created during production over the equivalent XC40. So it kind of puts things in a little bit of perspective there, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, and that particular story that you're citing in AM goes on to say that the overall average mix of power generated globally would dictate a far larger break-even point of 100,000 kilometres. So, I mean, it's particularly interesting and notable because this is coming from a manufacturer who will only be producing electric vehicles. So, they are pointing out that, this isn't an overnight switch. This is, this will take a number of years before we are carbon neutral. And just going back to the last story, just go back to my point about plug-in hybrids being part of that transition.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, like I say, I think we'll look at getting some guests on that will have a more direct opinion on this subject, because I think there's a lot of lobbying, a lot of conversations taking place, particularly between people like the SMMT, industry leaders from across the sector, with the government, with the local MPs, and to try and get them to rethink and be aware of the impacts both to the UK consumer and the automotive sector as a whole, particularly in the UK with these kind of decisions, and trying to get them away from just thinking about from a voter's tick into thinking the longer term impact without removing the green agenda. I don't think anybody's arguing with the green agenda. I think it is just as you say, Curtis, it's that transition.
It's how we manage it.
Yeah, exactly. So moving on to and finally, and the one thing with Motoring Research is that they never disappoint with their stories when we do get them on the podcast. And as you say there, Curtis, I think that the headline is that you can now order a new Mini Moke in the UK. And I can see you all there now, guys, looking at your bank balance to see whether you're going to be able to get one. But Curtis, how many are they going to produce for the UK?
Well, I was going to say that the good news is, yes, the Mini Moke is coming back, and you will be able to buy one, but only 56 of you will be able to buy one because it's a strictly limited edition, and it's called the Moke 56. And again, the good news is it's designed in Britain. The bad news is it's built in France. So it is the return of this. So we can agree that it was an iconic car. It is returning. And the coverage from Motoring Research is great because it goes into a bit of the history on how the original Mini Moke was designed in the 1950s. Actually at the request of the British Army, and it was designed by Alec Isigonis, who of course designed the Mini. So he was asked to create something that was small, agile, and could be dropped by parachute, which is what he came up with. But the army didn't want it because of its lack of ground clearance, not terribly durable. And it looked as though it would become one of those sort of footnotes to automotive history. But then the swinging 60s happened. And Brigitte Bardot bought one and drove it around Saint-Tropez. It was used heavily in the Prisoner, the TV show, and became this iconic car. And 14,500 of them were built in Britain over the course of the mid-60s. And in fact, production continued up until 1993 in Portugal.
And in what is it? In total, some 50,000 Mini Mokes I thought to have been built over that period. So again, I mean, the hip and trendy folk of Carnaby Street is the tag that you expect. So I think there's a few little sort of sneaky images of what to expect from the new one. I mean, it looks to have evolved a little bit. It's evolved a little bit.
It looks so the hood still has pop-ins, poppers to attach it to the main bodywork. Yeah, so it's very retro. Did we say the price?
No.
£24,000. Good investment.
Yeah, could be, couldn't it? I suppose it's again, it's one of them iconic cars, isn't it? That in time it will find its place. Whoever wants to buy these, but I mean, what's your view? Do you think they'll sell them?
All 56, yes, undoubtedly. Yeah,
potential that. I think they've probably already got orders on them, majority of them, haven't they? But yeah, so that's kind of it for this week. We're conscious of we're just talking far too long about a mini mulk, of which there'll be 56 of them coming to the UK for £24,000, of which the majority listening this morning either won't want or won't have the opportunity to buy. So that's kind of it. There's plenty of stories there. I think there is a couple of stories that will be ongoing. I think the September is going to be a crucial month for the industry, and we're very quickly moving through September, and lots of stories and data and insight will start to come out at the end of the month. I think the Robert Forrester around the lockdown in up there in the northeast, we're going to see what happens next with the further lockdowns, so I'm sure there'll be a little bit more on that. That's going to be an ongoing, and obviously around the hybrid and the topic of Brexit, and like I say, discussions are now moving very quickly towards the topic of Brexit. So that's it for this week.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's all the headlines for this week. You've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Join Philip and I again next weekend for more Chatter That Matters with our regular review of the headlines, and do watch out for our special midweek interview this coming week, which hopefully will pop into your feed from Wednesday. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.